Hey everyone! Welcome to Manhwa Heartbeats. Today, we're recapping the story called High Society. If you love epic romance recaps, you're in the right place. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps us a whole lot and keeps you up to date with our latest recaps. Sit back and enjoy. Before heaven and earth are even made, there's an endless ocean and a single island called Santnar. This place is ruled by a goddess, who's all about beauty and charm in every way you can imagine. At night, Santnar turns into a place where luxury and cunning shine bright like stars. But even here, there's a trashy spot where all the filth collects, a slum called Kimura. In this dirty part of Santnar, everyone calls Adele a little rat, making it clear she shouldn't even think about running away. They already know everything, and there's no escape for her. Abel calls out to Adele, asking her to prove she isn't mute. She snaps back, telling them not to touch her. One of them moves in closer, confirming she's actually a woman. She shouts at them to back off and breaks a bottle, trying to scare them away. But one of them grabs her and pins her against the wall. He tells her he took her in out of pity, because she's an orphan, but she never appreciated it. He's upset because she shines shoes just to get by, and he tried to go easy on her, but it's getting harder to do that. Then, he hits her with his elbow, telling her she has a week to come up with the protection money. If she doesn't, he warns her that she'll be dealing with him directly instead of just polishing shoes. A few days later, in Piazza San Celina, Adele is busy cleaning the shoes of two men. Her mind is racing with thoughts about what she's going to do since there are only 2 days left to find the money. She's worried about what might happen if she can't pay up and ends up getting dragged into something worse. As she's lost in thought, Cesare Bonaparte, the man whose shoes she's shining, complains that he'd rather die than have to hold hands with Lucrezia before walking into the dining hall. Adele listens, but she can't help thinking that avoiding Lucrezia isn't nearly as impossible as finding the money she needs. The paper Cesare is holding is the Daily Santnar *, and the headline reads about him, calling him the brightest star among the great nobles of Santnar, and the main character in countless love stories. It announces that Cesare Bonaparte has finally found his destined partner, Lucrezia della Vale, the youngest daughter of the della Vale family. Their marriage is based on an old agreement between their families, and with Lucrezia naming Cesare as the sole heir to Borgia, the news has captured everyone's attention. The aristocrats are all congratulating Lucrezia, celebrating that her long-time unrequited love has finally come to fruition. Cesare, hearing their praises, comments that they sure know how to talk. Jude, who's sitting beside him, isn't convinced, though. He says he won't be fooled, because he knows what kind of woman Lucrezia really is. Meanwhile, Adele just now realizes who Cesare is. She never imagined she'd run into someone so important in Piazza San Celina. She starts to think about telling him her situation, hoping he might take pity on her and toss her a few gold coins. Cesare is determined to stick to his plan, but Jude thinks the idea is completely crazy and questions whether Cesare is serious about going through with it. Cesare then asks if Jude has a better plan, and Jude suggests they find a good girl and sell her to the della Vale family. At that moment, Adele's mind races, and she thinks maybe she can get more than just a few gold coins out of this. Maybe it's a sign from God, giving her one last shot. She suddenly pleads with them, begging them to take her, convinced she could become the most expensive lady in all of Santnar. One of the men looks at her, confused, and asks what she's talking about. Cesare, surprised by her outburst, questions whether a shoe shiner can't tell the difference between shoes and people anymore, and firmly adds that he's not a pimp. Adele, undeterred, responds that she hasn't said anything wrong. She introduces herself as Abel but quickly corrects herself, saying her name is Adele Vivi. She tells them she can be whoever her master wants her to be and insists she can do better than anyone else. Cesare, intrigued but skeptical, questions her confidence, asking how she could possibly know what he wants. Adele boldly replies that she'll marry into the Delaveil family instead of him, pointing out that what he really needs is a fake daughter of the Bonaparte family. When he asks where she got that idea, she casually says she figured it out after reading the newspaper. She goes on to explain that in the marriage contract announced by the Delaveil family, only the family name is mentioned. It hasn't been decided who will carry it. So, if he buys a woman and tricks them into believing she's the Bonaparte's secret daughter, he could get out of the arranged marriage. As she's explaining, she realizes why it has to be a woman. It's because the Delaveil family has an unmarried son. Adele can't help but think she might be smarter than she ever gave herself credit for. Jude is impressed that Adele figured all this out just from reading a newspaper. Cesare, however, dismisses her idea, saying it's a waste of time, because the Delaveil family has been scholarly for generations. He wouldn't consider giving them a shoe shiner, who can barely read and write. He's clearly judging her based on her appearance, but Adele wants to prove him wrong. She asks what if she can do more than just read and write. Cesare, surprised, asks her to confirm, and she tells him she also knows the Algae language. When he asks where she learned it, she explains she picked it up from books at the public library and by listening to foreigners. Cesare thinks he's being toyed with by the sea goddess. He then says there's nothing he can do about it. No matter how smart she is, she needs to be good-looking if he's going to sell her. He places his shoes on her shoulder and says she's eliminated in the preliminaries. What a harsh way to treat someone. As they start to walk away, Adele calls out to them, asking them to wait. She throws off her cap, peels off the fake, unattractive skin she had stuck to her face, and turns around to face them. She's actually incredibly beautiful. She must have worn that disguise to keep people away. She asks if she's still eliminated now, and questions if she has all the qualifications. She can act, and he should give her a chance. Jude doesn't see the point in Adele pretending to be Cesare's sister. But then he notices that their hair and eye colors are similar, so he thinks it might actually work. He asks Cesare what he thinks. Cesare then asks Adele if she or her parents have any real connection to him. She replies that she doesn't and points out that is asking an orphan about her parents. Cesare, curious, wonders if she's really foolish enough to not know she could be in serious trouble if she gets caught. He asks her why she came to him, and she simply says it's because she's hungry. Despite that, he decides to give her a chance. As he starts to leave, he announces that is Cesare, and is sending her away. Adele responds with a line from Durante's play, saying they are going to the place they both wished for, and asks if they will meet again. Cesare, impressed that she knows the quote, thinks she might be quite useful after all. He tells her he'll be waiting for her at the Bonaparte estate until the afternoon. Adele still can't believe that Cesare agreed to her proposal. She's relieved that she won't have to worry about being sold off, but she's upset because she can't talk to her only friend, Clarice, about it. She wants to share the news, but Clarice is too busy right now. Adele has sent her a letter, hoping she'll read it soon. Then, there's a knock on her door. Adele wonders who could be knocking at this late hour. When the door opens, a man stands there and says he knew she would act like this. He's come to check on her because she hasn't paid the protection fee, and he thinks she might be planning to run away. He grabs her by the arm and yells at her to come with him. Adele, panicking, tells him to let go of her. She tries to escape through the window. The man calls her a crazy bitch and questions where she thinks she's going. As she climbs out the window and onto the ledge, she remembers Cesare's warning about getting caught. Even though she's scared, she doesn't care if it means her life is at risk. She just wants to get out of that place and is ready to give up everything for freedom. When Adele finally makes it to the Bonaparte estate, she's greeted by Ernest, the butler. He welcomes her warmly, addressing her as Miss Adele. He says they've been waiting for her and asks her to come inside with him. He tells her that the Lord is expecting her, and will be happy to see her. Standing in front of Cesare, Adele looks like a mess. Cesare notices her state and asks why his dear younger sister has arrived looking so wet and disheveled. He tells her to explain what happened. Adele tells him about the old man, named Nino, who runs the shoe cleaning store in Kimura. She explains that Nino kicked her out, because she couldn't pay the protection fee. Cesare asks if it was really Nino who did this, and Adele thinks to herself that he's no longer around. Cesare then asks if it's raining heavily right now. Adele tells him that the rain has been pouring so hard that she heard a shack in Kimura collapsed. Because of that collapse, someone in the slum lost their life. Cesare asks if there's anyone else giving her trouble. Adele replies that no one is bothering her at the moment, and she decides to leave it at that. However, she can't shake the feeling that Cesare might know about her friend Clarice. Cesare tells Adele not to worry too much. He says she just needs to make sure the plan goes smoothly. He assures her that the situation has been taken care of and now they should focus on the main goal. The plan is exactly what she thinks. She needs to seduce the son of the Della Vale family and marry him. He explains that she will have to transform every part of herself, her body, heart, speech, and everything from her fingertips to her toes, to look and act like a Bonaparte. This way, she can deceive the high society of Fornotti. Adele has 3 months to train for this role. If she fails to be recognized as a lady by the end of that time, the plan will be called off. Adele wonders to herself if she'll also be in trouble if the plan fails, but tells Cesare she understands the task. Cesare then asks if she's curious about why the time limit is set for 3 months. Adele guesses it's because of his upcoming birthday party. Cesare confirms she's right and praises her for figuring out his plan just by reading the newspaper. He adds that it seems she knows more about his family than he does. Cesare gently holds Adele's chin and tilts her face up to look at him. He wonders if there might be another reason behind her interest and asks if she is actually interested in him. It's an interesting thought. Could Cesare end up falling for her? If not, what will happen next? It'll be interesting to find out. Cesare asks Adele if she's interested in him. He then comments that since she's just a countryside bumpkin, her face is the only thing she has. To her, he probably seems like a savior, and that might be why she wants to cling to him. He also makes it clear that he doesn't want her coming to his room in the middle of the night. Adele thanks him for the advice and tells him she's not really interested in him. Cesare is handsome, but Adele thinks he might also be a bit crazy. She agrees with the idea that he's cheerfully crazy. When Cesare hears that she's not interested, he laughs and says that her expression says otherwise. He adds that he's warning her because it has happened before. Adele says she'll keep that in mind and refers to him as master. Cesare tells her to call him elder brother from now on. Cesare tells Adele to call him brother from now on. He explains that from this point forward, she will go by the name Adelaide Bonaparte. He says she is 5 years younger than him and used to live in a place called Capolo, which is far across the sea. She was thought to be just a commoner, but for some reason, she came to their land all by herself. Adele starts to think about whether Cesare is explaining how she became a Bonaparte to fit the situation. She also wonders if the chairwoman, Eva Bonaparte, is part of this plan. Cesare clarifies that Eva Bonaparte, who is not only his grandmother, but also the chairwoman of Signoria, is not involved in their plan. He says it would have been impossible to start the plan without her permission. Eva seems more interested in seeing her great-grandchildren, and is busy preparing to welcome Lady Lucrezia with open arms. Adele hopes there won't be any issues between Eva and her as she gets used to her new role. Cesare asks Adele if she's not curious about other things, like his parents. He points out that if she's going to pretend to be his younger sister, she should know about them. He wonders why she hasn't asked about them yet. Adele thinks to herself that everyone knows about Cesare's parents. They were so in love that they left their family and their young child behind. It's a well-known rumor. Adele replies that she only heard that his parents moved away when he was 7 years old. Cesare smiles and says he doesn't need to explain more. They can just assume that his parents had her afterwards, because they were so in love. He wraps up the conversation by saying that's all for today. Adele wonders if they might be siblings, and if they were abandoned in the same way Cesare was. Who knows? Cesare tells Adele that there's a maid outside waiting for her. He says she should follow the maid and address her by her new name, Adelaide Bonaparte. He hopes to see how ladylike she looks when they meet again, and is excited to see how much she will change. Adele responds that she will work hard on it. The maid introduces herself as Epony Kaur, and says she's honored to serve Adelaide. Epony shows her to the room where she will be staying. She explains that the Bonaparte family usually avoids luxurious things, so the room isn't very extravagant. However, she assures Adelaide that she won't face any inconvenience during her stay. Adele notices that the room is very simple for a lady's room. Epony tells her that they can talk comfortably with each other. Adele thinks Epony is a really nice maid. Epony tells Adele that she will start attending etiquette classes the next day. She also says that Adele shouldn't catch a cold, so she needs to come with her now. Epony offers to help her bathe, but Adele declines, saying she can do it herself. Epony insists that a noble person shouldn't bathe alone, and that it's part of proper etiquette. Adele wonders if there's no privacy in nobility, and laughs. Epony says it's not a request and starts taking off her clothes. Adele agrees to let her help. When Epony sees Adele unclad, she gasps and exclaims, "Lady." Adele reassures her that the bruises on her body will heal soon. She's used to getting hit, and knows that the bruises won't leave any scars. Adele worries that Cesare might break the contract, because her body is in poor condition, and asks if Epony will report it. The contract between Adele and Cesare will remain valid until Cesare's marriage to Lady Lucrezia della Vale. Epony tells Adele that it will be all right as long as she doesn't get caught by Della Vale or Cesare until then. Adele feels relieved. Epony adds that Adele is too skinny, not just because of her wounds. She says Adele should focus on recovering her body for a while. Even though it might have been mentioned to her before, Epony reminds her that she is now part of the Bonaparte family. Later, Cesare asks Epony how his younger sister is doing. Epony tells him that she doesn't look very healthy, and has marks from beatings on her body. Cesare comments that a pearl with scratches isn't very valuable. However, Epony assures him that if they treat her regularly, she will heal easily and become really beautiful once she puts on a little weight. Cesare remembers holding Adele's chin and looking at her the day before. He tells her that she's beautiful even now. He adds that he feels a bit sad that she is his younger sister. Adele, feeling suspicious, calls out, "Young master." Cesare reassures her that he's not going to do anything to her. He explains that he plans to end her life once their agreement is over. Adele thinks it's funny and wonders if he'll really do that. She wakes up again that night, as usual, because it's the time when the ships start coming back. The fishing boats that have been out all night drop their anchors at the port, and some fishermen bring in fish that didn't sell. She used to look forward to waking up each morning to wander around the port, but now she can hardly believe she's living such a luxurious life. She wonders if she'll be able to handle everything in the future. Unable to fall back asleep, she picks up a book. Her maid comes in and tells her it's time to get out of bed. She asks if Adele didn't rest well the night before. Adele explains that she just woke up a bit early and asks what she should do starting today. The maid says that from now on, she should expect to be busy all the time, and they will begin with breakfast. The maid tells her to sit down and asks if there's anything she'd like to eat. Adele says she's okay with anything, even if it's a bit old. The maid notes that Adele isn't picky and explains that being easygoing with food is a good quality for a lady. She adds that knowing dining etiquette is very important for a noble, and it's considered the foundation of being well-mannered. The maid starts showing her how to use the utensils, beginning with those placed on the side. She tells Adele to sit up straight, keep her chin up, and not to rest her elbows on the table. Adele should also avoid putting her hands down while eating. The maid praises her for following the rules as she eats. The meal includes beef carpaccio with arugula and celery, linguine with mackerel and abalone, and a potato-wrapped flounder with tomato sauce. Adele thinks the dishes are all excellent and delicious. But she wonders if she's eating too much, like a beggar. The maid tells Adele that it's great to see her eating well and suggests that she should try to have at least 4 meals a day. She explains that having a strong and healthy body is important, even for a woman. Adele likes the idea and thinks it sounds good. Next, the maid shows her around the mansion. She takes Adele to the study room, the conference room, the gallery room, and the billiards room, among other places. She points out that the master's office is in the center of the first floor and reminds Adele to always knock on his door before entering. She explains that these are the rules of the mansion. Adele asks if there's anything else she should be careful about. The maid says she'll tell her about the people living in the mansion. Right now, there are 6 people who know about Adele and the master's plan. In a few days, there will be a 7th person, Madame Flavia. She will also teach Adele about being a lady. Madame Flavia is known to be strict and stern, but she's very skilled. So the maid advises Adele to listen to and follow her instructions carefully. Adele says she understands and will follow the advice. She then asks how she should greet Madame Flavia when she first meets her. The maid explains that Adele should learn the Fornotti way of greeting. She shows Adele how to do it. Hold her skirt to the side, straighten her back, slightly bend her knees, and lower her head. The maid says Adele does it perfectly and praises her for being a quick learner. Later, Adele is lying on her bed, ready to sleep. Epony says a prayer, hoping the sea goddess will watch over Adele during the night. Adele responds, wishing the same for Epony. Adele lies in bed, staring at the ceiling. She closes her eyes and thinks about how quiet it is here. She notices that she doesn't hear the usual noise from Kimura anymore. It's so peaceful, and she realizes she used to take having warm food and a quiet place to sleep for granted. Suddenly, a voice calls her name, telling her to run. Adele opens her eyes and sees Epony. She quickly gets up as Epony says there's a big problem. Madame Flavia has unexpectedly arrived at the mansion. Adele knows it's going to be tough with someone like Madame Flavia, who looks so intimidating. Epony rushes in, saying they need to hurry. She brings Adele some clothes to quickly change into. Adele, still half asleep, asks what's happening so early in the morning. Just then, Madame Flavia bursts through the door. Madame Flavia Laudin comes from a long line of servants who have worked for the Bonaparte family for generations. She is well known in high society for her beauty and elegance. But she is also famous for being very strict and having unusual teaching methods when it comes to training young girls. Madame Flavia sees Adele and immediately screams at her, complaining about what she's wearing. Adele apologizes and explains that she was in a hurry. But Madame Flavia doesn't accept the apology. She yells at Adele, saying it's vulgar and disrespectful for her to answer like that. Adele lowers her head, trying to figure out what Madame Flavia wants her to do, and whether she should ask for guidance or not. At the entrance to the room, Cesare is standing there. He remarks that if Adele had proper manners, she wouldn't have summoned Madame Flavia in such an inappropriate way. He then tells Madame Flavia that he didn't expect her to show up so early in the morning. Madame Flavia calls out to Cesare, asking him to let her explain herself. Cesare greets her with a peck on the cheek, but Madame Flavia reminds him that they are in public. Cesare then asks if she slept well the night before. She says yes, and he is pleased to hear that. He tells her he would have liked her to join him for lunch, but he isn't sure if she will have time. She agrees, saying she welcomes any invitation from him. With a smile on her face, Madame Flavia looks at Cesare and places her hand on her forehead, saying he is really something. Cesare interrupts, saying he knows he's handsome. Madame Flavia thinks he's too charming, and Cesare asks if that's not why women like him. He then notices Adele staring at him and asks if she was about to wash up, adding that he should have come a little later. Madame Flavia tells Cesare not to speak so carelessly, because it might give Adele the wrong idea. Adele wishes she had known more about what Madame Flavia meant by that. Madame Flavia looks at Adele and says that she seems to not care about her appearance at all, and that this is damaging her pride. She asks Adele how she dares to act so carelessly when she's just a lowly person. Madame Flavia then steps closer to Adele, pulls her shirt down a little, and points to the dirty scars on her body. She demands to know what those scars are from. Adele tries to explain that the scars are nothing serious and will heal quickly. She assures Madame Flavia that they won't interfere with the plans and that everything will be fine. Madame Flavia then turns to Cesare and tells him that Adele is not good enough. She says she doesn't even know where Adele came from. Madame Flavia suggests that Adele must have gotten those scars from homeless drunks, while she was involved in some shameful activities. She continues by saying that there are people even among the lower classes who are lazy and have no courage. Madame Flavia believes that even if Adele spent 100 years trying, she wouldn't be able to fit into high society. According to her, Adele isn't even close to being a noble lady and isn't suitable for being part of Cesare's plan. Madame Flavia adds that it's obvious Adele is trying to use her body to climb up the social ladder. Her harsh words are like a fire that can burn down someone's courage and self-respect. Adele remembers the old man who had scolded her, asking if she was looking down on him just because he lost a few dollars. She recalls another customer who called her a dirty lowlife because she didn't clean his shoes properly, and someone else who complained about not receiving last week's allowance. Adele probably wonders what it would be like to go back to that kind of life in the slum. Adele apologizes, saying that while she may have many shortcomings, she is trying her best. Madame Flavia, with her arrogant tone, questions if Adele thinks she can hide her past just through hard work, and if she believes she can fool people who have always lived in high society. Madame Flavia thinks it's arrogant of Adele to believe she can change her status simply because she has lived in a lowly way her entire life. Adele says she wasn't born with parents and hasn't learned much, so she's not sure if it's possible to change her past. But she thinks her brother Cesare must believe it's possible, which is why he brought her here. Even though Madame Flavia is looking at her with disgust, Adele adds that if Madame thinks there's a problem with her trying, maybe it would be better to talk to her brother about it. Adele's boldness shows she's ready to face any obstacles ahead. Madame Flavia tells Adele to talk to Cesare if there's any problem, and asks for forgiveness if she seemed rude due to Adele's lack of education. She starts to call Adele a little something, but doesn't finish her sentence. Then she remembers she has an appointment and says she'll be leaving. As she walks out, Cesare watches her with a cool smile. His smile is way better than Madame's harsh look. He turns to Adele and tells her he was impressed with how she handled things, and she thanks him. Adele wonders if Cesare noticed her bruises. He tells her she doesn't seem to be handling the situation very well. He explains that Madame Flavia is probably just stressed out. Cesare adds that things would be easier for Adele if she follows the rules and mentions that she seems more sympathetic than she looks. Maybe that's just how he sees her as the young master. Adele asks Cesare if he's suggesting she should act pitiful and beg. He replies that she's already pitiful enough without needing to act that way. He says it's not a big change for her since she's lived like that her whole life, just a bit strange. Cesare wonders if she's smart enough to handle threats and make the right choices, calling her Adelaide. It seems like he's trying to provoke her, and she turns away, apologizing. In her mind, Adele thinks he might be testing her reaction. She promises herself to do her best to meet his expectations, because she doesn't want to be someone's source of entertainment. Cesare says that everyone becomes boring eventually as he walks away. The next morning, Adele asks Epony if Madame Flavia will come back to teach her again. Epony tells her not to worry. As she opens the door, Madame Flavia is already waiting for them in the hall. Epony reassures Adele that what's been planned will go ahead. Madame Flavia looks at Adele with a look of clear disgust. Madame Flavia addresses her as Adelaide Bonaparte, and says that Bonaparte isn't a name that just anyone can have. She adds that even having a great blue star on her chest would anger the sea goddess, making it clear that Adele doesn't deserve such a prestigious name. Madame Flavia continues, saying that Lord Cesare wants her to become a refined lady, but she still has a long way to go. She then tells Adele to get down on her knees. Adele looks at her in shock and disbelief. Madame Flavia repeats her command, making it clear that she expects Adele to obey. With no other option, Adele gets down on her knees, wondering why Madame Flavia is being so harsh. She thinks about whether it's because she isn't of noble blood, or because she used to work as a shoe polisher, or if Madame Flavia just wants to hurt her. Adele feels that if Madame Flavia is trying to hurt her, she's chosen the wrong way since her knees are already worn out from her past work polishing shoes. Madame Flavia tells Adele to listen carefully. She steps on Adele's thigh and says that Adele is just an asset. All she has to do is stay quiet and behave until she's sold to the Delaveil family. Madame Flavia warns that if Adele tries to go beyond her limits, they won't hesitate to feed her to the sharks. She insists that Adele should know her place and asks if she understands. Adele confirms, and Madame Flavia tells her to get up so they can start the training. Madame Flavia begins with Adele's walking posture. Epony brings out a pair of shoes and explains that they are designed to correct her walking manners. Adele must wear these shoes all the time, even when Madame Flavia isn't around. As Adele puts on the shoes, she thinks about how they are her new shoes. She wants to mention how uncomfortable they are, but Madame Flavia interrupts her, telling her to stand up. Madame Flavia says that Adele has to walk continuously from one end of the room to the other, and she shouldn't stop until Madame Flavia says so. As Adele is about to start walking, she stumbles and falls. She takes off the shoes and says she can't do it anymore. Madame Flavia scolds her, questioning how she can have such an attitude during a lesson. Madame Flavia adds that Adele doesn't even have the will to learn and concludes that she doesn't deserve to be a Bonaparte. She tells Adele to leave immediately. Madame Flavia tries to chase Adele out, calling her a filthy brat. But then she thinks about how Adele has been walking in those small heels for hours without complaining. Madame Flavia wonders if she should give Adele another chance to walk. She suspects that Adele is being stubborn and thinks too highly of herself. Madame Flavia orders Epony to leave for a while, but Epony apologizes, saying the young master instructed her not to leave Adele's side. Madame Flavia tells Adele that she will speak to Duke Cesare personally and swears on the name of Lord Anne that she isn't planning to punish her. After hearing this, the maid leaves. Madame Flavia then turns back to Adele, calling her a lowlife. She tells Adele straight out to leave the mansion. Adele replies that this isn't what the person who brought her here wants, but Madame Flavia insists that she's saying this now because, compared to the Bonaparte family, the Delaveil family isn't a great match for the marriage. However, they are still superior to her, since she is lazy and crude. Madame Flavia says Adele should know her place and step back. She adds that Lord Anne will ensure Adele is safe and they will give her some money as compensation. Madame Flavia then asks if Adele wants her brother to marry Lady Lucrezia. She says she thought Adele was there to follow her brother's wishes, but it seems she was wrong. Madame Flavia apologizes, saying she will tell her brother the truth. She also says that this is what the chairwoman wants, and that she is following the chairwoman's orders. The agreement between the Della Vale and Bonaparte families is very old-fashioned and has lasted a long time. Madame Flavia explains that without such an agreement, someone like Duke Cesare wouldn't even consider marrying. He's admired by many women, yet is still not settling down and acts like a child. She says that these prestigious families must stay united and asks Adele if she understands now. Madame Flavia continues by saying that Adele is stuck in the middle of a big struggle right now. She notes that Adele hasn't been following her orders and calls her a greedy brat, questioning if Adele is behaving this way to get more money. Adele replies that it's not about money, she simply enjoys the food at the mansion. Madame Flavia is surprised and says, "What?" She didn't realize that Adele is just living for the moment. Madame Flavia goes on to say that the things she mentioned, money and the future, are luxuries for those who can barely make ends meet. Promising a bright future means nothing to people who are struggling, as they can't even get by in the present. Madame Flavia questions how Adele can act like she does, given that she's been starved before. She calls Adele a beast, saying that she's only lived a life of struggle until now. Adele has experienced extreme hunger, even going a whole month with just dry barley bread. Madame Flavia is frustrated, stating that Adele has lived an uncertain life where finding enough to eat each day was a constant worry. She adds that's why she has nothing more to say to Adele. Madame Flavia then apologizes, saying she's sorry, but even if she orders Adele to leave, she won't be able to leave the Bonaparte family. She watches Adele and wonders why, despite her tough life, Adele still has an elegant appearance and fresh charm, even while wearing such uncomfortable shoes. Madame Flavia finds this confusing and is frustrated by the thought of the Duke and Adele together. She laughs, wondering if she should speed up finding other solutions, or if she might even be expected to produce a daughter for the Duke. She decides she needs to move on and find other ways to handle the situation. The week has flown by quickly, and Adele realizes she's already spent a full week enduring Madame Flavia's classes. She's learned a lot about speaking properly, proper manners, understanding social cues, how to talk to ladies of higher status, gracefully turning down a gentleman's invitation, and walking the right way. Eponine asks if Adele's feet are okay. Adele says they are fine, and adds that, as Madame Flavia also knows, her walking style is now perfect. Madame Flavia praises Adele's fast progress, saying it's really impressive. She notes that Adele soaks up all the information like a sponge, even though Madame Flavia has only told her things once. While ongoing training is still important, Eponine mentions that no one would think Adele is from a lower class now. Eponine then notices some ladies standing at a distance and asks about them. Adele explains that they are part of the Orcanina's delegation. Eponine explains that the ladies are here because, while Adele was busy with her training, the second prince of Orcanina recently became the emperor with the help of Lord Cesar. It was a big job, because the prince didn't have a strong position before, but he managed to succeed in the end. To thank Lord Cesar, the emperor sent a gift to the mansion, which is why it's been so noisy lately. Adele realizes that helping the prince will make her brother Cesar's influence and status even greater. Eponine agrees, saying that's correct. The ladies greet Cesar with "Your Grace," and he responds with a pleasant "Good morning" to them. They ask if he's been there all along, because they have been searching for him. Eponine tells Adele that it looks like Cesar is with the ladies now. Cesar is often seen as the favored one by fate and the goddess, someone blessed by the sea goddess, but he doesn't seem to care much about those blessings. Even though it might sound strange, he appears empty inside. Eponine suggests they should leave before anyone notices them. Adele agrees, saying, "Sure. One of the ladies asks Cesar what he is looking at as he stares at the trees. He says he thought he saw a mermaid. When she looks over to check, he blocks her view with his fingers, joking that there's already one right there. The lady tells him he's being playful. Cesar then asks if she doesn't like it and if she'll visit him again that night. She replies that if he promises to be serious, she'll come see him tonight. Cesar thinks to himself that she's just talking nonsense and wonders why people try to give so much meaning to a one-night stand. Cesar thinks to himself that the blonde lady seemed quite appealing before, but not anymore. He tells her it's cute, but thinks she's being presumptuous, feeling a bit bad about it. She says she'll be leaving, and he tells her to have a safe trip back. He thinks it's boring and walks away. Cesar tries to remember the path Adele took earlier. From a distance, he sees her telling a man to let her go, but the man doesn't listen and keeps holding her hand tightly. A few minutes earlier, Adele accidentally hits her foot against a rock and falls down. Epony screams, "Young lady." Adele apologizes and says she needs to check her feet right away. Epony sees that Adele's feet are injured and says it's serious, insisting that Adele shouldn't work anymore. Adele asks if there's any anesthetic, thinking she can handle a bit more pain. Epony tells her they will end the day's class here. She says she will get a wheelchair for Adele, so she should rest her feet for now, and she'll be back quickly. Adele puts her feet in the water fountain, and the cold water helps ease the pain. It's a bit tough, but it's nothing compared to the hard days she had in Kimura. Adele sees three men walking by, talking among themselves. One of them says he can't believe it's a mermaid's heart, and that Bonaparte is impressive for revealing it. Another man says Cesare must have just wanted to throw a party. Adele realizes they must be nobles and they are heading towards her, so she decides to hide. As they keep talking, one man mentions he can't see Lady Lucrezia anywhere, and thought she would be with Duke Cesar. Another man says that Duke de la Vale has been confined to her quarters and wonders if it will be over soon. Adele hides by the side of the waterfall, wondering if they have left. One of the men spots her, grabs his friends, and points towards her, saying there is a woman hiding in the water fountain. As she tries to move, Adele falls into the water. One of the men, named Henry, is told by his friend that he is crossing the line, but Henry just says he didn't push her, she fell on her own. Henry wonders aloud if he has caught a mermaid instead of finding a person. He questions who she is, noting that she doesn't look like a lady or noble since she has no shoes, but her dress is too nice to be from a maid. Adele stays silent, and Henry asks if she won't talk. He warns her that she'll be punished if she doesn't. Henry also wonders if she's acting this way just to be punished. One of the men tells Henry to stop and points out that they are in Bonaparte's territory. Henry responds that it doesn't matter and questions whether he has to be extra careful even when punishing a maid. Another man tells Henry he's going too far and tells him to lower his voice. Henry continues, asking if Bonaparte sees himself as a king now. Adele says it could be possible if they keep pushing her, comparing it to tearing her arms and torso apart. One man confirms that she speaks like a noble, but Adele insists again that they should let her go, or they'll regret it. As it becomes clear that she's not joking, the men wonder who she really is. They guess that she might be an etiquette teacher, but her rough hands make them think she could be a prostitute who sneaked in. They consider that it makes sense, especially since they have many customers around. Adele tells Henry again to let her go, but Henry calls her a bitch, and says she won't be treated like a human by Cesar. He doesn't understand why she even came to the mansion, suggesting that she should just get close to him since she's there. Just then, Cesar arrives. The men turn around and call him Duke Cesar. Cesar looks at them and says it seems like they are dealing with the bastard Cesar instead of the Duke. He asks Henry Petch if he agrees. As Cesar walks closer, he comments that Duke Petch will be pleased to hear about this. He mentions that Petch is coming to Bonaparte's mansion, with his old age, just to borrow some money, and that Madame Petch is with him to make him look more pitiful. Hearing this, the two men with Henry try to hold him back, because he starts calling Cesare a bastard and getting agitated. They tell him to calm down. One of the men tells Cesare to calm down, because his words are going too far. Cesare puts his hand on Henry's shoulder, and says they are the ones who crossed the line by treating his younger sister like a prostitute. He adds that with Henry's behavior, it's hard to believe he's even a noble. He wonders if the woman is really Cesare's younger sister, and asks what he means by younger sister. Cesare walks over to her, gives her his jacket, and asks what's happening. She asks how he found her, but Henry interrupts, saying he shouldn't lie because everyone knows Cesare doesn't have a sister. Cesare explains that she was brought in and that his parents are fine, and he questions if he needs to explain further. Henry responds that it's still not entirely their fault and asks which noble lady looks like this, with bare feet covered in scars. Adele apologizes, saying she hurt her feet badly while practicing, because she didn't want to bring shame to the Bonaparte name. She explains that she had trouble walking and sent for Epony, but she didn't expect something like this to happen at the Bonaparte mansion. Carrying her, Cesare reminds her not to push herself too hard and questions the value of a reputation gained this way. He warns that if he becomes a laughingstock in social circles, it will ruin Bonaparte's reputation. He adds that her health is more important and that they are family, so it's not something to worry about. He gives her a gentle kiss on the forehead. Adele wonders about the word, family, since she has never heard it before, even as a joke. She questions if nobles treat their family like this and how she should react to such warm treatment. Then she kisses him on the cheek, and thanks him for calling him brother. He says it's nothing. One of the men confirms that Cesare is indeed Adele's older brother, and the other man agrees, noting that they do look alike. Cesare then turns to them and asks if they still want to continue messing with his sister. The men quickly respond, saying it was all just a joke. They explain that they were trying to stop Henry from causing more trouble, and had no idea Adele was his sister. Cesare finds their excuses amusing and raises an eyebrow, asking them what they would have done if Adele wasn't actually his sister. The men try to backpedal, saying it was simply a mistake. One of them then tells Cesare not to worry too much about it and asks him to forgive them for their actions. Cesare, still frustrated, says that he plans on making Henry's life difficult as well, even though he doesn't know which family Henry belongs to. He adds that it was a mistake on their part, and hopes they will be able to move past it. His tone suggests that while he's willing to let it go, he expects them to understand the seriousness of their actions. The men seem to sense his irritation and nod in agreement, hoping that Cesare will accept their apology and move on. Away from the others, Cesare asks Adele if she is uncomfortable and tells her to hang in there because they are almost at the mansion. He notices that a blonde woman and another lady see them and worries they might misunderstand the situation. As they enter the mansion, Cesare asks himself if he really should be doing this. Adele, trying to get up, apologizes and stumbles, falling down again. It's clear that she's having a tough time managing everything at once. Cesare notices her struggle and asks about Epony. Adele explains that Epony went to get a wheelchair, because she's unable to walk properly right now. Cesare shakes his head in frustration. He tells her that this isn't what he had in mind when he agreed to help. He adds that he didn't spend his money just to have someone who can't even stand on their own. He starts to realize that he might be being a bit too harsh, but he can't help feeling that the situation is frustrating and disappointing. Adele apologizes again, saying she didn't expect to run into him like this. Cesare, feeling a mix of irritation and confusion, puts his foot on hers. He questions if she has some kind of fetish for getting hit or hurt by people. He wonders if this habit of being mistreated is something she picked up from the streets, and if she just needs someone to be strong and act as a man for her. He's perplexed by why anyone would engage in such actions in Bonaparte's territory, especially when they don't even seem to understand what they're doing. His frustration grows as he tries to make sense of the situation. If you're eager for the next chapter, drop a comment expressing your interest in a part 2. Don't forget to subscribe and ensure to hit the notification bell to stay updated. Until next time, bye.